Well, it is official. The Pac-12 has hit midnight and the slipper no longer fits. It's over. Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten, and this conference is done. Welcome to a Power 4 and possibly a Power 3 as the Big 12 wins again. This is an emergency live edition of Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, happy Friday for some of us as the news breaks across social media that Washington and Oregon are headed to the Big Ten. All that we heard earlier this week was how the Big Ten's not going to go shopping, that the Big Ten doesn't really want to dip into Oregon and Washington, and that they might be left out to dry along with some other schools and find themselves in the Big 12 out of necessity, right? The Big 12 has one expansion so far by bringing in those four schools and add in Colorado. Now with Oregon and Washington moving over to the Big Ten along with USC and UCLA, you get 7 teams in the Pac-12. And here's the really bad news. 3 of those 7 teams are named Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. That's not going to last very long. Those schools are going to leave the Pac-7. You cannot build a conference off of 7 teams. And I'm very confident that Arizona at least understands that. Utah is going to dodge the Big 12 as long as it can, it seems. And I don't understand why. Like, where in your leadership you've decided that, it's a good idea that we should just try to sync with the Pac-12. And that if you're Arizona State, it makes zero sense to me, the hangups for Arizona State. There are so many of these Pac-12 truthers that still exist in that conference that believe it to be the place to stay, that you can just ride this thing out. There's a 0% chance that ship sinks. And I truly hope we've gotten to a point with Oregon and Washington jumping ship that people in the Pac-12 know and understand, those schools that remain know and understand that the conference is not going to exist much longer. Not only is there not a business model for it, there is no business. The doomsday clock is hit. It's midnight. The slipper doesn't fit anymore, and the Pac-12 is done. For nostalgia purposes, sure, this is awful. I mean, no more Pac-12. You can never watch Cal play Washington State again. You'll never see a great rivalry matchup between Washington and Arizona State. And there's so many people who've been so wrapped up in caring about this, and I have not. At what point, if you're a Big 12 fan, you get this too. At what point did anybody care about us? At what point did anybody care about Big 12 fans? A couple of years ago, before BYU came into the fold and UCF and Cincinnati, nobody was crying over the fact that the Big 12 was likely going to fall apart. Everybody now seems to be eulogizing the Pac-12. It's some sad, terrible travesty that the Pac-12 is not going to exist anymore. Newsflash. Nobody was crying over the Big 12. And to be honest, I don't think anybody's really crying over you. If you're the Pac-12, you've done this to yourself. People keep looking around for, who do we blame? Do we blame Utah? Do we blame USC and UCLA for leaving? Do we blame now Oregon and Washington, who are going to be, that's the pin. You pulled the pin from the grenade, and the pin's name was Oregon and Washington. That's what did it. That's what's going to explode this entire thing. Who do you blame from the Pac-12? None of them. I don't blame a single school. You have to look at leadership here. George Kliavkoff's terrible. So bad. I mean, it is dumbfounding to me that you can take a conference with a semblance of history. You have Stanford, which people are now calling the best athletic department in the country. You have so much to build on with USC and UCLA. UCLA, maybe the greatest basketball powerhouse of all time. And now what? It's gone. There was a time where the Pac-12 was the best conference in baseball and in softball and in basketball and in women's basketball and in volleyball. And now the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. And maybe you're upset. Maybe you're a big softball guy. I am. And maybe you're upset that the Pac-12 doesn't exist. Maybe that really just grinds your gears here that Oregon and Washington are leaving. But it's just the way that it's the nature of college athletics. There used to be a Pac-8 was what it was called. There used to be the Southwest Conference. And I'm sure when the mid-90s rolled around, there were a lot of people who, for nostalgia purposes, were upset the Southwest Conference wasn't existing anymore. Why are we acting like this is some dictatorship? Like the Big 12 has been spying on everybody, and there's been some kind of collusion for the Big 12 to rot all of college athletics. It's just not the way this thing is gone. When the Southwest Conference dissolved, nobody's looking around going, these are terrorists of college athletics. I cannot believe the Southwest Conference has completely dropped off the face of the earth. Who is to blame for this? I just don't think that we can point at anybody outside of Pac-12 leadership and say, hey, it's your fault. It's not USC's fault. It's not UCLA's fault. What did they do? They tried to make money. And guess what? We were in a spot 2 years ago. Here's what blows my mind. Provo Cougar fan, thank you. Outsider of the echo chamber, thank you. Cal may be done with athletics. Very good point. Provo Cougar fan, sure you can. You can definitely watch Washington State and Cal on FS1. It'll actually be on the CW in the new Mountain West Conference. At this point, I think maybe the best thing the Pac-12 can do is merge with the Mountain West. Yeah, why not? Just merge the Mountain West, because the Pac-12 is already talking about bringing in San Diego State and Fresno State. You might as well just call yourself the Pac Mountain West. I saw Broke Pac Mountain. Yeah, just do it. There's no chance this conference can survive. You've lost your 4 biggest brands. And I want to hunker down on something with the Big 12 here, because we talk about how the Big 12 almost fell apart entirely. What I want to hunker down on is when Texas and OU left, had the Pac-12 got on the phone immediately with Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and said, we want to add you. We want to bring you into our conference. Had the Big 10 gotten on the phone with Kansas and Kansas State and said, we want to add you to our conference, there would have been 4 teams left in the Big 12. Nobody would have cried about it. And those 4 teams, Baylor included, would have gotten left behind in college athletics. 100% it's what would have happened. What very well could have happened, what I was envisioning a couple of years ago, was that Texas and OU leave. Along with them, Oklahoma State works its way into the Pac-12. Baylor was begging to get into the Pac-12. Maybe the SEC calls a team or two. And I was staring down the barrel, you were too, of the Big 12 completely falling apart. It seemed obvious that was the trajectory of this conference. And now instead, somehow the Big 12 has outlasted the Pac-12 and has become I would say the Big 12 is certainly the third most prominent conference in collegiate athletics. I don't know if we've gotten the official announcement about Arizona and Arizona State to the Big 12, but now it is a formality. If Oregon and Washington are going to the Big 10, if they're going to get a big share of money in the Big 10 along with USC and UCLA, and that all is going to be finalized, then there's no reason that Arizona and Arizona State can stay in the Pac-12. The big question to me doesn't center around Arizona and Arizona State anymore. Now it centers around one school, and it's Utah. You know that Arizona wants to come to the Big 12. What's their holdup? The idiot at Arizona State. What's the guy's name? I don't even remember the guy's name. Was the president? Why am I supposed to know Arizona State's president's name? Who was like, guys, maybe we shouldn't do this. Okay, great. If you want to have cold feet, if you're Arizona State and you're Utah and you want to have cold feet here and not come into a power conference, dude, that is your prerogative. As someone who's covered the Big 12 for 5 years, I can guarantee you that if the Big 12 doesn't get Arizona State or Utah, they're completely cool with it. If the Big 12 has to full stop at 14 with Colorado and Arizona, I don't care. If Utah gets stuck in the Pac-12, if Arizona State gets stuck in the Pac-12, I don't care. And I don't know why you would have a reason to care. Hell, I'm super excited to have Arizona in this conference. I am pumped with the fact that the Big 12 could bring in Colorado and Deion Sanders. Is there spectacular football history? Have those teams been powerhouses in the last decade? No. So you know what it means? More competitive athletics. It means that Baylor, TCU, BYU has a chance to beat up on these teams. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. That's what I love about it. How well are these new guys going to perform in football in the Big 12? I don't know, but I know it's going to be competitive. You bring in Arizona State, dude, they were a bottom dweller with Herm Edwards, a Hall of Fame caliber coach. Herm Edwards and Arizona State still found a way to be a bottom dweller. Look at Utah. Utah's winning games in a really bad Pac-12. And that's what blows my mind even further. We all sit in here, the Baylor fans, the BYU fans, those who are really rooting for the Pac-12 to fall apart, which I unapologetically, the Pac-12 falls apart. Again, I have no solace. You're not going to find any remorse out of me. I'm not apologizing to anybody. Who gives a rip? Southwest Conference fell apart. Anybody still crying over that? No. You move on. It's what happens. I don't know when we created this thing that every time a conference implodes, we have to write some sob story or letter to it. Tulane was in the SEC. Tulane was a founding member of the SEC. And now what happened to them? Is anybody crying over Tulane? Welcome to what just happens in college athletics. But this whole Utah deal, man, they've been to the Rose Bowl. They've been winning Pac-12 championships. You know who the best football team in the Pac-12 is? I'm sorry, BYU fans, plug your ears. Me, plug my own ears. I think I hate them now. It's Utah. As insufferable as Utah has been from a fan base standpoint, Utah is the best football team in the Pac-12. And you know what they said? Damn good football, terrible leadership. Meh. They're so nonchalant about it. For some reason, Utah is still hugging to the Pac-12. Here's what I want. You know my ideal scenario? Big 12 goes to 16. I don't think Arizona State's in the fold. I don't think Arizona State's in the fold if they don't want to be. Utah's not. But do you think Brett Yormark's going to beg Utah or Arizona State to come to this conference? Of course not. Especially with Oregon gone, with Washington gone. Those were the projects for BY. He wanted those two teams. And if they didn't want the Big 12, he was cool with that. He's not married to anybody. Yormark is a businessman. So what I'm looking at, Utah, Arizona State, if you don't want to come to the Big 12, no one's upset with that. You stay. Utah is slowly working its way back into the Mountain West. Washington and Oregon just went to the Big 10, compete for college football playoff every year. And Utah's responding by trying to go back to the Mountain West, by regressing with this. That blows my mind. So now with the leftovers, Stanford, don't need them. Cal, certainly don't want them in the Big 12. Oregon State, Washington State, all of these teams are not desirable enough for the Big 12 to go out and try to snatch them up. Big 12 can be done with expansion right now, and they have already won. If Brett Yormark wants to keep going, UConn's on the table. That's the best basketball option out there. The Big 12 and Brett Yormark has already shown, hey, we're looking basketball too. We'll go to Houston, we'll get good basketball. We'll go to Cincinnati, we'll get good basketball, good football. We'll go to BYU and have a love for all sports. We'll go to UCF and get good football as well. Colorado's got sports, has won a national championship in football. There is a real world. I think the ideal situation for me now is Brett Yormark says, look, if you want to jack around, I got UConn on the phone. If you want to jack around, if you're Utah and Arizona State, what do you add to this conference? It's going to be that substantial. You stay where you are. You chose this. You waited too long to say you wanted to come to a power conference that you wanted to survive. And Brett Yormark picks up the phone and says, hey, UConn, yeah, you're in. And UConn's not a great brand, but academics, absolutely. National championship in basketball. Imagine the look, and maybe you have to take a step back to really think about it, when a conference takes away a national championship team from maybe the most historic basketball conference in America, the Big East, when the Big 12 is so powerful at this point that they have the national championship winner in college basketball on the phone on hold saying, give me a second. UConn's a great brand in college athletics, multiple national championships in men's and women's basketball. And right now, if Utah and Arizona want to sit over there and jack around, the national champion in basketball is sitting on hold on Brett Yormark's phone. All he's got to do is press the red button, say hello to 14 Big 12 teams. At this point, maybe the most ideal scenario for the Big 12 with Washington and Oregon going to the Big 10 is you just tell Utah and Arizona State no. You just say, look, if you want to sit over there, that's fine. You're good. And the Big 12 slaps everybody in the face by putting Arizona in at 14 and then UConn in at 15 just for good measure, just to laugh at Arizona State and Utah and say, hey, thanks for nothing. That said, I don't think, and Anthony Williams, great point here. Did Did the Big 12 really expect UCLA, USC, Washington? I don't think so. I don't think Brett Yormark was actually looking at these teams and saying, we have to get Washington, we have to get UCLA. To be honest with you, I don't think Brett Yormark has looked at any team and said, we have to get X to stay alive. The Big 12 could have stopped at 12 and said, we're good, we're done, this is who we are, we're a really fun conference, we're maybe the third, fourth best conference in America, full stop. Instead, Brett Yormark added Colorado. I should add this, and hang on to this too. This is what you bring to your, if you're at the water cooler at work, if your buddy's asking you about, hey, are you knowledgeable about this expansion stuff going on? Here's what you tell him. Brett Yormark has only walked one team into the Big 12. Brett Yormark has only expanded one team further in the Big 12. It was Bob Bowlesby who pulled the trigger on BYU, on Houston, on UCF, and on Cincinnati. It was not Brett Yormark. Now, Yormark coming in said, we can stop where we are or we can keep going. That was his whole, the thing he said at Big 12 Media Days was, look, we're in a great spot. We can keep going. We can stop. What I don't love about all this, if you've watched a lot of Locked On Baylor, also, if you aren't subscribing, what are you doing? I woke up at 5 o'clock in Alaska Standard Time here just for expansion. The one thing with the Big 12 Brett Yormark that I don't like about this, there's a downside to me, and it is the fact that there are now going to be 16 teams, 8 of which are not old members. They're all going to be new. When you have a business, say you've got a corporate office, a board of regents, and you've got 16 seats, you don't want 8 of them to be brand new seats, especially when you're talking to revenue sharing. How are those conversations going to go when Arizona, who is tied to Arizona State, sits down at the board of directors meeting for the Big 12 and says, hey, we need X amount of dollars? Or when a school like a Utah says, hey, look at our travel for our small sports this year. We're paying X amount of millions of dollars. And that's the reason Washington was balking at the Big 12. Washington looked at the Big 12, said it's going to cost us $10 million in travel, and we don't feel like we get that out of a TV deal. Washington needed that from the Big 10. You want to know what I think's so funny? What's the worst brand in the Big 12 right now? Take yourself 5 seconds to figure out what the worst brand in the Big 12 is. This is what I think is hilarious in this whole deal. While Washington and Oregon are going to say they won, and they did, all intents and purposes, they did. Sure, they went to the Big 10. They didn't die in the Pac-12. Do you have the worst brand in the Big 12 in your head? Because there's about 7 of them that you could choose from. I say choose from. It's just that tough. There are so many you go like, is it Iowa State? No, probably not. Well, is it TCU? Well, TCU just went to the college football playoff. Well, it's not UCF. They have that claimed national championship. Maybe Houston. There's not one decided worst brand in the Big 12. There's not one bad brand of the Big 12. Folks, let me introduce you to the Big 10. Washington's going to play Rutgers. Does that not blow your mind? You just saw, if you're Washington and Oregon, sure, you got more money. But if you're Washington and Oregon, you just signed up to play Rutgers. You just signed up to play Northwestern. The SEC has 1 Vanderbilt. The Big 10 has like 4. And that's what Washington and Oregon are going to. There has to be, at some point, a conversation opening up about trimming the fat in the Big 10. From a Big 12 standpoint, and let's get real deep in the weeds here, I guarantee you the Big 12 is really happy with BYU. They are the brand that stands out of the 4 that this conference took. Then you look across the room and you see UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, and you say, if we had an opportunity, had the Big 12 waited, if 2 of those teams weren't here, could Washington and Oregon have gotten in the fold and taken more money? That's a legitimate question to pose. If the Big 12 was more patient, and granted, if there were only 10 teams, I don't know if they would have had the gumption to pull the trigger, but does it feel like there comes a point where you have to start thinking trade-offs? If the ACC falls apart, which I've already predicted that they will, Florida State is trying, and they will pull out of the grant of rights. Florida State will lead the way out of the ACC, and if you think that Clemson and Miami are going to sit there and watch them do it, then you're stupid. Sorry, that was harsh. But if Florida State's gone from the ACC and the Big 12 has an opening to take an NC State or an opening to take a Louisville or a Pitt, or even if they really get on the high side of Virginia, a UNC, where do you trade? Do you say, hey, look, we can go to 20? Or do you start thinking about trimming the fat? Because I can guarantee you, as happy as Washington fans are going to be today, do you think they've considered the first time that Washington's going to play at Rutgers? Do you think that Oregon fans have considered that their first game of 2026 is going to be against Northwestern in Ireland? Do you think Oregon fans are excited by that? There is not a matchup in the Big 12. There's not a team in the Big 12 that I don't like. You cannot take Oregon and put them in a hypothetical matchup with any Big 12 team and say, this doesn't look fun. This doesn't make sense. I truly believe that. Call me delusional. I believe that. But now Oregon's going to have to play Northwestern. Oregon, Purdue, regular season game, 6 feet of snow. There are some really, really gross matchups that will come out of this, which I'm still adjusting to. Syracuse and Clemson being a regular season game in conference play. Also, let's have this conversation. While everybody points at the Big 12 and says, you're a big bully, you're the big mean guy that started all this mess, you could really point to Texas and Oklahoma for getting the ball rolling. But if you want to point to the Big 12 and call the Big 12 the mean big bully and say that they're messing with the history of college football, and I think those people are the delusional ones, then I want you to look at the ACC where Clemson and Syracuse is a regular season matchup. I want you to look at the Big 10 where Rutgers is playing a regular season game now against USC. That's what I want you to see. The Big 12 is not a big bully in this whole mess. The Big 12 is just doing what's right for business. And there was a tweet, and there have been so many tweets that say, Brett Yormark is not a college football fan. Brett Yormark is simply a businessman. And I don't think it's true. Brett Yormark has said he grew up a big college fan, big college hoops fan specifically. So maybe that's why he's building a basketball powerhouse. There is so much to look forward to in so many sports for the Big 12. And I don't think that Brett Yormark's not a college athletics fan. He is, and that's why this is happening. That's why this is happening. So I love this too. That is great. This is West Virginia Mountaineer Lair with Kenny. I have a question. What has academics done for the Pac-12 at realignment? What has academics done for Stanford, for Cal? The last time that we talked about the idea of the Big 12 falling apart a couple of years ago, it was, the Pac-12 is not going to let us in because we're not smart enough, right? We're the flyover states. Isn't that a funny statement now, the whole flyover state thing? Yeah. What do you think about that now, Pac-12? Dude, take your academics and shove it. Baylor went and got Research 1 status, and guess what it did for Baylor? I'm sure something great behind the scenes, but how's it affecting you? Did anybody wake up this morning in Pac-12 land and think, yes, Stanford's academic prestige will hold us all together today? I don't think so, and it didn't. Your conference died because you looked at the wrong thing. In athletics, academics does not bring the money. In athletics, academics does not bring the money. If that is what you're going to have right here, right now, on a platter, is money, then athletics is a way to go. You're seeing it with why Washington and Oregon are jumping ship from the Pac-12. The TV deal was set in their face, and then it was laughed at. Everybody laughed at this TV deal and said it's so bad that more people are going to need to leave. And now what you've built, especially if Arizona and Arizona State, Utah even come to the Big 12, if it does end up happening that way, you've built the best conference. I think you've built the best conference top to bottom in college athletics. Now, before you start throwing your phone and punching your TV screen, I think you've built the best conference in college athletics. I'm going to take a sip of my Bang, my Candy Apple Crisp Bang, and get wired up. The Pac-12, if you go look at the Directors' Cup most years, who wins it? Stanford. Stanford's always in the mix to win the Directors' Cup. Do you know why? Because they play all the sports you've never heard of. You go, Quidditch. Interesting. And Stanford wins the Directors' Cup. It feels like every year the winner of the Directors' Cup is just really good at swimming or really, really good at women's tennis. More power to you. That's great. Who won the national championship in women's tennis this year? I invite anyone to tell me. The Pac-12 always seems to be at the forefront of the Directors' Cup, which is your metric for who is the best at the sports that don't really matter from a revenue standpoint. Now, if you look at the entire implosion of the Pac-12, the Big 12 is getting some teams that are boosting the Big 12 to, and hear me out here, the best team in the best conference in college basketball, the Big 12. The best conference in women's college basketball, the Big 12. The best conference in volleyball, make a strong case for the Big 12. The best conference in softball, easily the Big 12. You can start building a case for the Big 12, checking a whole lot of boxes in almost every sport that's not football to be the best conference in college athletics. When a conference itself is able to check so many boxes at the top of what people are watching, that puts them in contention for the best conference in college athletics. Basketball runs through the Big 12. Women's basketball will soon run through the Big 12. Baseball is getting better. Softball has run through the Big 12, will continue to run through the Big 12. There are still some massive brands in this conference and new ones being added in, especially as West Coast teams come to this league. There is no longer just a case for the Big 12 being the most fun conference in college basketball. Now it is. The Big 12 might be the best athletic conference out there if you look top to bottom. Can I say outright that it is? It's tough to defend that to the grave, right? Court of law. I don't know if I could lay that on the table, but I think the only thing that really gets you is this. Thank you, Mike Jefferson, SEC football. The SEC is the king of sports. The SEC has the most money because of football. The SEC will continue to build a bigger TV deal, and ESPN would be stupid. Fox would be stupid. CBS would be stupid not to give them whatever they ask for in TV because the revenue is certainly deserved in SEC football. That keeps the SEC paramount. It's the best conference in college athletics, but now the Big 12 is going to make a case because of the new teams, because of the smaller sports that have been added in. That, to me, gives hope that the Big 12 can be long-lasting. Look, empires last 1,000 years. 999 to go for the Big 12. There are three conferences right now with stability. The Big 10, the SEC, and the Big 12. And it's damn good to be a member of one of those three conferences, especially when, and it's so much more impressive that the Big 12 is in that three compared to where this conference was a couple of years ago. We all thought it was doomsday, that the Big 12 was done, that this conference was not going to exist anymore, that the best case scenario for a Baylor, the best case scenario for an Oklahoma State was to join Oregon State over in the Pac-12. Now with Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, the Big 12 is a Power 3 conference, with Florida State trying to leave the ACC, with Clemson being right behind them and Miami being right behind them. The big brains in that conference will not sit around, period. The Big 12 is right here. Great question from Nate. Nate says, do you think the Big 12 can catch the Big 10? Do I think the Big 12 can catch the Big 10 in football? No. In my opinion, and I think this might be the best opinion that I have, there are about 10, 12 brands in college football that can win a national championship, maybe 15. And it takes you a good 10 years to build yourself into that category, and takes you even longer to pull yourself out of that category. There are about 12 teams that can win a national championship in college football. Arkansas can't do it. Baylor won't win a national championship in college football in my lifetime. I don't think, as close as they got, that's the closest TCU will get. And they got boat raced 62-7 in the national championship game. Hell, I paid for a ticket to go to root for TCU there. So before you say that I'm coming after TCU, I think that's the closest that a lot of the Big 12 teams are going to get. The only schools that exist that can win national championships in football, in my opinion, are currently in the SEC and the Big 10. There will be one-off years. There will be years where BYU gets close and Baylor gets close. Maybe Oklahoma State can make a run for it. But every time one of those teams gets right on the precipice, it just doesn't work out. Look at Oregon. Oregon hasn't won a national championship. Oregon's been to one college football playoff. Washington has been to as many college football playoffs as Oregon and has been to doubly more than USC and UCLA. There are the Alabamas, the LSUs, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. There are 12 teams that can win a national championship in college football. And I don't know that any of them exist currently in the Big 12. So can the Big 12 catch the Big 10? From that standpoint, I don't think so. The Big 12 doesn't have an Ohio State. The Big 12 does not have a Michigan. The Big 12 doesn't really have a Penn State, albeit they haven't been national championship caliber since I've been alive. So I don't think the Big 12 can catch the Big 10 in football. I don't think the Big 12 can catch the SEC in football. But I do know the Big 12 is loads better than those conferences in other sports, especially your other primary revenue sport, basketball. Not only is the Big 12, and here's your clip, not only is the Big 12 the best conference in college basketball, the Big 12 basketball is the same caliber as the SEC in football. The Big 12 in basketball is the same caliber as the SEC in football. It's head and shoulders above everybody else, and it's really not close. Go to Ken Palm and look at it. Go to the Pac-12 and ask, do you think, as excited as Colorado fans are, have they considered the fact that they're no longer going to play like 3 quad 1 games? Every game in conference play in the Big 12 is now a quad 1 game. You could go play 20 quad 1 games in your season, 18 of them coming out of the Big 12. Will that change a little bit with UCF being in, change a little bit with Cincinnati, who's struggled the last couple of years, BYU, who's floundered a bit? Maybe, but you added in Houston, who's better than Texas and Oklahoma. You've added in Arizona now, who's one of the top national powerhouses. There are no off nights in basketball in the Big 12. There is not a Vanderbilt in Big 12 basketball. If you look at the revenue sports, the primary revenue sports, football and men's basketball, the SEC, yes. The SEC, king of football. Jeez. All right, play ball. The SEC, king of football. The Big 12, king of basketball. And the Big 12's crown, even taller. And I think the Big 12 can catch the Big 10? I don't. Especially with Oregon and Washington going there, I don't. But man, do you guys feel that? Do you feel excited today? Dude, I'm red in the face. I have a little thermometer right here in my room that tells me the temperature in my room started at 67 degrees. It's 71. I think it's from me. I'm just exuding this heat of passion and fervor. It's just so, and maybe the reason I'm so charged up is because of you Utah fans and because of you Arizona State fans that sat there and said, we're okay in the Pac-12. We'll ride this ship all the way to the bottom of the ocean. We'll get inside a little submarine and go visit it. Yeah, Utah said we're going to ride this ship down to the ocean. Arizona State said we're right behind you in a submarine. And how's that going to work out? I hope it works out to where both those teams are kept out. I hope it works out to where both those teams are kept away. And when that day comes, that Arizona and UConn are here, and there are 15 teams in the Big 12, and Utah's still over there in the Mountain West again. Arizona State's with them. Hope you guys are fun buddies. Hope you guys enjoy your prison cell together. At least you get to serve your sentences with one another. I'm just giddy, man. It's kind of like Christmas morning. And everybody out there who is eulogizing the Pac-12 and, oh, it is dead, and oh, how terrible, and oh, I feel so upset for those Pac-12 fans now. You just won't get that kind of remorse out of me after the way the Pac-12 treated the Big 12 a couple years ago, after Stanford and Cal said, we would never associate ourselves with the flyover states. We would never associate ourselves with religious schools and institutions. None of you are smart enough. None of you have the academics to be in the Pac-12. Where did that get you? Where did it get you? And then the teams that I really liked 3 weeks ago, Arizona State and Utah, have just been, pardon my French, you can't see this on Baylor's campus, asshats. Yep. That's what they've been. They have. And I don't think I appreciate that. So if they want to go sit over there and die, we will be having a fun little Big 12 party while you're doing it. Here's what I want to do. My last little game here I want to play before I head off. You're going to have 365 Sports later on. I'm sure they'll have Sheer on. You're going to have all kinds of people. The Monty Show is going to have great content. There'll be content all over the place today from Locked On as well. Go to Locked On first. Watch our shows from today here at Locked On Baylor. Keep up with Locked On Pac-12. I hope that guy, for Spencer McLaughlin, I hope his job still exists in a couple of years. I'm getting kind of worried for him. It's how I want to close out, though, is reading off the roster of the Big 12. Welcome to the conference, and we're glad to have you here in the Big 12. Central Florida, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Iowa State, Baylor, Houston, TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Kansas and Kansas basketball, Kansas State and their basketball, Colorado, Deion Sanders, good to have you in here. BYU, what a friend. Arizona, welcome to the Big 12. Arizona State, Utah, Brett Yormark will be on the line for 30 more minutes. And if you say no, the national champion in college basketball is right there ready to pick up. That's what the Big 12 is right now. That's what the Big 12 is. I want you to hear one more time. Listen to these teams and think about the idea. Get it in your mind that this conference might vie for the best conference in college athletics because of what it does in basketball and pretty much everything outside of football. The football can get there. As I read these teams, and I'm doing the same thing, think about this conference being not just the most fun in college athletics, but a true athletics dominant power right now. UCF and what they bring you in football some years, they're almost an outlier here, which is a wild thing to think. West Virginia, Cincinnati, college football playoff, damn good basketball most years. Iowa State, great basketball now. Oh my gosh, Hilton Coliseum at Iowa State. Kansas basketball, national champions. Kansas State, still searching for the whole national championship prowess thing, but football, Big 12 champions. And basketball, in the conversation for a Final Four this last year with Jerome Tang. Oklahoma State, wide right. They're a kick away from a national championship berth. Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, football on the come up. Basketball is going to get there too. TCU, a national championship game appearance. Baylor, 2 Sugar Bowls the last couple of years with a national championship in basketball. Houston, Final Four in basketball and basketball prowess. Colorado, Deion Sanders, the biggest show in college football right now. Arizona, massive contenders across college basketball. Football with Jed Fish will be back. Softball, baseball, all wrapped in. Love you, Arizona. BYU, maybe the most historic sports brand in this conference right now with an alumni base like almost no other. BYU is effectively a service academy with the amount of alumni they have across the country. When Army and Navy play football games in the middle of Tennessee, they pack out the stadium. When BYU plays a football game in the middle of Iowa, you best bet they're going to pack out the stadium. And then Arizona State and Utah, we don't need you. You need us. We don't need you. If you want to come, pick up the phone quick. If not, that's all right. Brokeback Mountain, you guys have fun. That's the Mountain West and the Pac-12. You guys just go over there and sit and think about what you've done for a good 20, 30 years. We're pumped in the Big 12 to have what we have because it looked like for a while we weren't going to get here. Folks, my room's got to cool down. I got to cool down. I have only a quarter of my way through my Bang energy drink. If I go the whole way, which I will, I might have a heart attack. Oh, this has been Locked On Baylor Emergency Edition, Oregon, Washington. We didn't need you. That's okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy your time in the Big Ten. And I hope you love playing Rutgers. Washington, I hope you enjoy going and playing Northwestern. Oregon, you are just going to love the Northeast. It is beautiful, and the snow is fantastic. You guys have a lot of fun. I'll be having a blast when I'm in sunny Orlando in November. I'll be all right. The whole Big 12 will. Thanks for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Do the subscribe thing. And, I don't know. I have a Twitter account, too. I don't really post a ton of expansion stuff always, but sometimes I do. I'll be back from Alaska in 2 weeks. I'm announcing big career news. I'll let you guys all know about that, too. So keep up with the stuff. I'm only 22, man. I got some years to go. I'm going to keep pumping out the content because this is all huge. And I love the fact that the Big 12 survived, and I'm not eulogizing the Pac-12. This has been Locked On Baylor. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Come back tomorrow because I'm going to be doing more stuff tomorrow on Locked On. I love you guys. Baylor.